Hello, happy Sunday to you, and welcome to another Insta Church. For those of you that don't know, every Sunday I give my platform over to ideas that I think are bigger than myself and more important than anything I would have to say. And it comes from a place of truly wanting people to not spend much time where I've been. A few years ago, I found myself having sort of like an early midlife crisis. I needed to redefine what life was about for me. What is life about to me? It starts with gratitude and becomes about enjoying life, simply enjoying life as best we can. And that's hard sometimes because there's a lot of tough headlines out there and a lot of calamity. But enjoying life as best you can while meaningfully serving others, finding ways to be a light or truly pouring your time, treasure, money, energy into other people to whatever degree life is asking of you. Serve others. All that to say, that's sort of the direction that I've headed in, and I think could be fulfilling for everybody. There's a universality to giving yourself away, the positive net benefits of that I've experienced, and I've done some videos that prove that scientifically, anatomically, biologically, we all benefit from giving ourselves away. I believe a Christian faith calls us to the greatest kind of service, one that's detrimental to the self even. But there's a beauty in that, and there's something worthwhile in living that kind of life, in my opinion, because I've lived the other one, and I didn't feel that way. Life is best lived with and for others. So, that said, how many of us know about Cleopas? Cleopas was a disciple of Christ. Most scholars, I think that this might have been Joseph's brother. So it would be Jesus' uncle. His step-uncle? Was Joseph his biological dad? I don't really know. Stepdad? What do we call him? Point is, this is somebody who was close to Christ, knew Christ well. In Luke chapter 24, we get this story about a man. Jesus, we know, we're told it's the resurrected Christ, meets these two people walking down the road to Emmaus, a little village about 7 miles outside of Jerusalem. This man stops them and they speak. Jesus asks them what they're talking about. One of them, named Cleopas, asks, "Are you the only one in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days?" "What things?" he asked. "About Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it is the third day since all this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning, but they didn't find his body. They came and told us they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the woman had said, but they did not see Jesus." He said to them, "How foolish you are, and how slow to believe all the prophets have spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. Now later on that day, they continued that journey. Jesus was going to continue on his way, and these two invited him in and said, "Well, come on in. We're really interested in this conversation. You seem to know a lot about this Jesus fellow." And they sat down to a meal, and Jesus broke bread and he gave it to them, and instantly their eyes were opened to who this was. And when that happened, Jesus vanishes. And it said that he appeared to several other disciples that day, and that's when they realized who they were with. How much had happened from the time of meeting this resurrected Christ and the conversations that they were having, the truths that were being revealed, to the time that they invited him in and had a meal. This proves to us that there's danger in us not recognizing Christ when we meet him post-resurrection. I think it's really important that this is one of the first resurrection appearance stories that we get after his crucifixion. It's one where his followers don't recognize him. I don't think that's an accident. I think it's a warning that we could very well, and most likely are, Cleopas, unable to recognize who Christ really is now that he's risen from the dead. And Christ, who's called those believers to be the body of Christ, his hands and feet. I look around today and I see articles, headlines about the declining numbers in churches, evangelical churches, Catholic churches. Scandals are everywhere. There's this crude marriage being made between right-wing politics and evangelicalism that is problematic to recognizing who the body of Christ is. If we as believers and disciples have trouble recognizing who Christ is, how in the world are we going to be the kind of people that look like the body of Christ? It's never been about being some kind of moral superior authority over anybody else or dictating how other people should live their lives. It's always been about being a light on a hill, being salt that flavors the earth, being so charismatic like these men were so drawn to Jesus as he drew near to them. And they said, we don't want this to end. You're fascinating. Stay with us. Have a meal. We'll feed you. And he broke the bread and their eyes were open. Oh my gosh, we're sitting with the Messiah. That's the call on our lives, is to be so curious. What are you talking about? So interested in other people's lives in a wholesome, non-judgmental way, but also living with such a light that people go, I want what you have. Right now, I see a lot of Christians. I don't want to be anything like them. And I promise people that are not believers, have not been indoctrinated by the church or aren't under the wing of any institution like that, don't want to be like them either. You know, Christ said, but I tell you, do not resist an evil person. What? His life and his work was about submission to this world. That is what's interesting. Because that's a hard thing to do. Otherwise, we just look like everybody else. Didn't he say that? Oh, don't the pagans love like that? They love people that they like. They love people that are like them. Even non-believers who worship other gods do that. That's easy. You know what makes you a light? You know what makes you really interesting? Is when you submit to evil people. That shakes people up and goes, wow, you love anyway? It creates a little crack or fissure in reality, in our universe, where it says something different is going on here and light gets through the brokenness. That's the life that Christ called us to, and it's the life he lived. One of submission, not to good people, to the world, the whole world. It's worth it to Christ that evil people be allowed to be who they want to be today, so long as mercy brings more peace into the world. That's the job of Christians. Would we recognize that if we saw it? Do we recognize real Christians, the real body of Christ? If Jesus came down today, would we recognize him? I don't think a lot of us would. Jesus was a socialist. He gave to all. He gave with abundance. To many, to anybody who is hungry. That's what the story of the loaves and fish teaches us. He gives himself away freely. He doesn't go, do you deserve this? The bread, the fish, I mean, have you been working hard enough? Because you could probably go get a job that, could buy, you buy your own. Never. No questions asked. Why do we have to qualify who we deem worthy of our love and service and mercy and grace and compassion and empathy? That's what Christianity is all about. What does Christ look like today? He told us exactly what he looks like today. He said, I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. Then the righteous will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you a drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you? And the king, notice he calls himself the king, because that's who he's coming back as. That's who we're going to meet the second time around. The king will answer them, truly I say to you, as you did to one of the least of these, these, my brothers, you did it to me. Christ is in the oppressed. Christ is in the downtrodden. Christ is in the poor and the needy. Christ is in those who are suffering, those who are sick. He's in the unlovable. He's in those who are hurting, those who have addictions, those who have problems, those that nobody else wants to care for. That's who Christ is. And he's waiting to be clothed and cared for and nurtured and loved on. I think one of my biggest fears is dying someday and meeting Christ and him going, I'm not sure exactly who you are. I mean, I know you talked about me a lot, but like, I didn't know you in that world. I was hungry and thirsty. I needed help. Where were you? There has to be a radical paradigm shift these days if we are to be the body of Christ, and if we're ever going to recognize him when he comes.